Friends, Pradeep Pindyala, Professor of Anesthesiology. Today I am going to talk very briefly about cardiac cycle. Actually, it is absolutely physiology, but I will be just touching upon the brief introduction about cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle. As you are aware, the cardiac events and the sequence of electrical and mechanical events which occur in single heartbeat is called cardiac cycle, which is usually about of just zero point 0.8 of a second. And you should know about JVP also. JVP is usually associated directly with the cardiac cycle, jugular venous pressure, and the interpretation you should be very clear about it, and it will be asked in the while. ACV, X and Y descent. A wave is due to atrial contraction. C wave is caused by the bulging of the tricuspid valve into the right atrium. X descent is due to the atrial relaxation. V wave is caused due to the filling of the right atrium, and Y descent is due to downward movement of tricuspid valve. Okay, and I'm sure you won't forget how the first heart sounds is produced. First heart sound is nothing but closure of mitral and tricuspid valve simultaneously, and second heart by the closure of the semilunar valves, that is aortic and pulmonary valves. Okay, now talking about this, cardiac cycle events can be divided into diastole and systole. Diastole represents ventricular filling and the systole represents ventricular contraction, isn't it? Systole and diastole occur in both right as well as the right heart. Okay, not just only left heart, though with different pressure. I'm sure you should be knowing about it. And diastole begins with the closing of aortic valve, simultaneously, obviously, pulmonary valve also, and ends with the closing of the mitral valve as well as the tricuspid valve. This period encompasses the ventricular relaxation and filling, and diastole represents when the blood vessels return blood to the heart in preparation for the next contraction of the ventricle. Okay, and systole begins when the mitral valve as well as the tricuspid valve closes and concludes with the closure of the aortic as well as the pulmonary valve. The stage of the cardiac cycle represents ventricular contraction forcing blood into the arteries. I'm sure you know about it, but just a reminder, and the ventricle contracts when the pressure within the ventricles exceeds that of the blood vessels. I'm sure you know all this, but just it requires a little bit of reminder. The ventricular function can be divided into 4 phases. This is very important. You should be aware about it. This can be asked during the Viva. What are the 4 phases of ventricular function? Isovolumetric relaxation, when the volume remains the same, no changes. Okay, isovolumetric relaxation and ventricular filling, isovolumetric contraction. Always remember, isovolumetric means there is no change in the volume, and isovolumetric contraction, rapid ventricular ejection, which is around about, ventricular ejection is around 60 plus, okay, percentage. Isovolumetric relaxation is the period immediately after the ventricular contraction when the aortic valve have closed and the mitral valve has just opened. This period represents a time of very low pressure in the ventricle, which helps create a gradient which opens the mitral valve. The mitral valve opens, signifying the beginning of ventricular filling, obviously, where the high pressure from the blood vessels forces blood into the ventricles. After the ventricle fills and transitions to contracting, the pressure eventually exceeds that of the blood vessel. And that is the gradient which closes the mitral valve and which marks the beginning of systole and causes the first heart sound. Obviously, the closure of tricuspid as well as the mitral valve. Okay, the time between this closing of mitral valve and the opening of the aortic valve is the isovolumetric contraction period. Understood? This is where pressure builds, yet the blood does not leave the ventricles. Does not leave the ventricle. Eventually, the pressure within the ventricle exceeds the pressure of the arteries, and the aortic valve opens, and that is the beginning of rapid ventricular ejection. As I have mentioned, ejection of the ventricle usually it ejects about 60% of its volume, and after the aortic valve closes, the cycle begins again. Okay, that is how the entire cycle repeats, and I'm sure this is a bit of informative to you. I won't exceed 5 minutes usually because that's an incentive to read cardiac cycle further and improve your knowledge. Thanks for patient listening. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.